Yet again, President Trump has taken to Twitter to fire shots at the critics in the media on Thursday, insulting cable news anchors Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough. David Folkenflik is a media consultant for NPR. He joins us now. Okay, David, Megyn Kelly, Carly Fiorina, Mika Brzezinski. I mean, attacking women is not something that's foreign to this president. Do you think we had fuel to the fire when the media keeps keeping the story alive and focusing on his tweets?
I think if we focus on this to the exclusion of other news that's happening, policy that will affect millions of Americans, we do the public and our audiences a great disservice. I think if we don't acknowledge that things like this occur, that we don't acknowledge this is aberrant behavior, that if it were done by anybody else but the President of the United States, we'd say this is contemptible, then why we'd, we miss out reminding folks that there are standards, that we do have expectations of our public figures, and we, in a sense, allow certain kinds of unacceptable behavior to creep up towards normalcy. So
we've missed a news cycle for many people who are now forced to talk about his tweets that probably don't even want to talk about the tweets.
Or think about it. You know, look, in this age where we have so many outlets and news is posted and broadcast so instantaneously, there are multiple news cycles happening over the course of the day and even sometimes at the same time. And people are able to find the news they want to have. It is my guess that people are covering these things in part because they get clicks, maybe clicks of outrage, maybe clicks of stick it to the press, whatever. They get clicks and they get audiences, and I think that's part of what's driving this. I do also think we are trying to address the fact that this is a president who has things to say that are completely unprecedented, and also is doing it in unprecedented ways. And that the media is trying to acknowledge that. I mean, we're less than 200 days into this thing, and we're trying to figure out where the plateau goes here. And it's hard to do sometimes. It's newsworthy. It just shouldn't, at the beginning of this, I suggested maybe we should take all of Trump's tweets every day and do the equivalent of sticking them on page A11 of the newspaper and say, look, we got a box, we're going to take note of it, but we're not going to obsess about that. It keeps creeping back to the equivalent of the front page and the top of the newscast.
So what do you do with a situation like this where there is a sector of America that backs this president and agrees they're not happy with the media? And does it isolate this base that he enjoys great approval ratings with?
Well, look, there is a core, as you say, of the public that seems very dedicated to him, and almost nothing's going to shake them. If you think back to the campaign and the moment where there was the tape of the bus, the Access Hollywood tape, where he boasted of sexually assaulting a woman who was a colleague of the guy he was talking to, Billy Bush, everybody in Washington thought he was done. Establishment Republicans were running away, fleeing, cashing in frequent flyer miles to get as far away from him as possible, figuratively, right? And yet he persevered. He won enough electoral college votes to get in there, and he is the President of the United States legitimately, as far as we know, and that's fine. I think the press needs to be as fair-minded as possible. It also needs to be as clear as possible on its values. It is not a partisan or ideological thing to say we care about transparency and openness and to push for that with the White House. It is not ideological or partisan to say there are a lot of things here that need coverage and scrutiny and light shed on it that you're not willing to provide, and we're going to be part of that process. And I think it needs to be fair and transparent. It needs to be humble about its own shortcomings, as CNN had to be in recent days, and I think it needs to move forward without apology. But I think fairness is going to be the key characteristic that defines a successful press action, as opposed to the idea of balance, where we're just saying, well, somebody says this, somebody else doesn't say that. I think civility, fairness, toughness can all be knit together in the same basket.
The president has a very ambitious political agenda that he wants to push forward. Do you think that having these tweets will somehow take the wind out of that political agenda?
I think it does so less with his base, although you've seen it narrow the number of people who support him. He's got extremely historic high unpopularity ratings among much of the public, but that core is still with him. What you see on Capitol Hill are lawmakers in his own party trying to figure out how much should they stick their neck out, if they're moderates, if they're from swing states, for what seems to be an extremely aggressive repeal of the expansion of health insurance for many tens of millions of Americans. That's the kind of space where he may risk things. It's less on the grand scale at the moment and more on the narrowly focused audience up on Capitol Hill.
Why do you think it is that the White House doubled down, didn't apologize?
The president himself believes that apologies are weak, that they show a vulnerability, and he thinks that the only way you succeed is even if you make a mistake, you blow past it, you don't acknowledge it was a mistake, and maybe history won't record it. One of the interesting things about this, and journalists say this and they're not wrong, is that a lot of these stories about the outrages that people feel about what the president says on Twitter, we've heard it before. It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't matter. We should go to other things. I don't think we should obsess about those things, but part of what journalists do is get the best first draft of history out there. I think we are recording what is happening in these opening months and stanzas of the Trump administration, and that in and of itself is an important thing to do. We are establishing a record so that when people turn to it, when there are moments where they say, you know, I care about this again, they'll be able to go to a place and find that out. It's not going to be buried in a history thesis that comes out 20 years from now.
David Folkenflik, thanks for coming in, weighing in on this.